And we're going to continue with the sixth panel for the New Mobility Order in the World Forum. And we're going to be dealing with the topic of regulations, the regulatory framework in terms of smart mobility and smart regulation. We're going to be looking at how the EU and the international authorities are dictating the roadmap, but of course those regulations have to be transposed into regional, national, and local measures. And so in order to ensure compliance with these regulations, we have a number of speakers with us today that are going to talk about the subject of regulations. We are going to start off with Pere Navarro, who is Director General of Traffic for the Government of Spain. David Perez, who is Regional Minister of Transports and Infrastructures of the Regional Government of Madrid, who will be joining us online. We also have Pablo Arias from the Transport and Tourism Committee of the European Parliament. And we have José Enrique Millo, who is Secretary General for External Action, European Union, and Cooperation of the Regional Government of Andalusia. He will be moderating today's panel. We also have these and other speakers who will be joining in on the debate. We would like to remind you that we had a first approach to this topic yesterday in the first day of our forum, and today we're going to expand upon that same subject, in which we're going to see how the European Union is very active in putting a number of proposals and legislation on the drawing board, but of course the transposal of those measures must be applied at the regional, local, and national level. So again, I want to welcome all of the panel speakers on this sixth panel. A very good morning to you, David, and to all of the panel speakers. If you like, you can go right ahead and start introducing the colleagues and the introductory words for each of these. I'll take a seat here. Good morning. I think there was no better way to introduce this panel discussion than the words of the Minister of Transport and Urban Mobility. She talked about the importance of decarbonizing the transport sector, some of the mechanisms that are being provided by the European legislators, but then are transferred to the regional and local administrations in order to put in place specific actions that coordinate and that are that corroborate those EU instruments. Yesterday we had an approach to this very subject. We were talking about the regulations that the automobile and automotive industry are subject to, and we talked about motorsports and the entire industry as a whole. And then there was a little bit of debate that really was susceptible to different points of view, and we are going to continue to hear different standpoints and viewpoints and insight from different levels of the administration, as well as on the regional level. So I'm going to invite the speakers that we have on this panel today, that as Jesus Alvarez mentioned, is Pere Navarro, who is Director General for Traffic for the Government of Spain. David Perez, who is going to be joining us online. He is from the Government of Madrid. Pablo Arias, who is member of the European Parliament and member of the Transport and Tourism Committee. José Luis Millo, who will be speaking last. We have a representative from the Town Council of Seville. Sorry, he will not be, Mr. Millo will not be speaking, but will be replaced by someone from the Town Council of Seville. And then we have Trinidad from the Malaga City Council. Welcome, Trinidad. So, as I was saying in this introductory address. We need to work on those objectives that the minister just reminded us of. And I'd also like to add that on behalf of the regional government, our regional premier, Juanma Moreno, yesterday, who inaugurated this forum, talked about the importance of the European Committee of the Regions and their involvement with the European Parliament. You know, the European Committee of the Regions works with the European Parliament and the Commission, and how their decisions are transposed to local and regional policies. And so I think this is once again a good sign of that commitment that is European-wide in reaching the objective of decarbonization and reaching a closer proximity to all of the European commitments and challenges. But obviously, we need to take decisions in order to do so. And when we take decisions, and it was a reminder just a few minutes ago that those decisions have to be realistic, they have to be doable, they have to be attainable, and they have to be, of course, embraced by citizens. And so I think today is a great opportunity to see how those decisions are being made in your respective administrations and how legislators and policymakers can work together. That is truly the objective of this forum, to work together in terms of the automobile industry, the automotive industry, the energy sector, and the policymakers, that is the public administration, who at the end of the day have a mandate by citizens to legislate and create policies in the benefit and the best interest of all. So in taking into account the current situation, the economy, the energy sector, well, those are all going to be topics we're going to touch upon. I'd like to start off by giving the floor to the speakers for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll open up the floor for Q&A, and hopefully there can be some kind of discussion initiated with the audience. You are free to raise your hand and jump in and ask questions and give us your viewpoint. I'd first of all like to give the floor to an online participant, David Perez, from the town, from the regional government of Madrid, the region of Madrid. He is recovering from a minor surgery, and he's recovering very well, but is unable to travel, and so that's why he's joining us online. But he has been so generous as to accept the invitation to intervene online, and he's going to give us a short presentation. He has a information sciences degree from the Complutense University of Madrid. He was mayor and auditor in Alcorcón near Madrid, and he has the current position as the town councillor for housing and infrastructures, and he is now also in charge of transports and infrastructure for the regional government of Madrid. David, or in Spanish, David, you have the floor, and welcome. Thank you very much, Jose Enrique, and all of the organizing committee for the kind invitation to have a representative from the region of Madrid at this forum. This forum, I'm sure, is just getting started. It's just getting off the ground, but it's going to become a reference in the world of mobility. And I think the discussions and debates on mobility are going to be increasingly relevant in the future. And we know that day by day, it's in the news, it's in the media, and it's really playing a starring role not only in our governments but in the public at large. And that has a good side and a bad side. The good thing is that everyone is recognizing how important mobility is. There are experts on the panel, experts that I admire immensely and that have worked for so many years in bettering transport, mobility, and the energy sector, and by transposing European legislation to our country. But that's the good part, that infrastructure and mobility and transport is being so fairly acknowledged as an important subject. And we have the three levels of an administration on the panel today: regional, national, and the European Union. So in this respect, I think we will have a very full and comprehensive set of ideas provided, and everyone has their own viewpoint. And I want to start by saying that the objectives that we have set out to accomplish, both in the ministry as well as in our region, it has to do with the Green Deal that was passed by the European Commission, and we can only comply with the Green Deal if there is coordination amongst the different levels of government. And of course, public-private coordination as well. Because if we're going to meet those goals, they're very, very ambitious goals, and they're very demanding, and there is a lot of money in play. There's a lot of resources that have to be allocated to that. So only by means of a very fine-tuned coordination of efforts, and I know that Andalusia is also has that same commitment, just as Madrid does. We have that as a top priority, and in order to be successful, it has to do with not only becoming sustainable, but using our innovation to its full potential, and of course using our resources wisely. And I think we can see that in our mobility strategy in Madrid. We have a strategy in place, and we are updating that strategy continuously so that we can face all of the changes that are taking place around the world, and that of course directly affect us. We know that the way we work, our lifestyles, our leisure, the way we move about, our transportation habits change. And so we have to change our strategies in accordance with that. And so transport has to have an organizational framework, and we have a consortium in place, and our consortium is preoccupied with each and every aspect that affects mobility. And it's based on three basic pillars. We have the metro, which is the underground system. We have over 600 kilometers of metro lines in Madrid. We're expanding it to another 26 kilometers. And our underground metro system in Madrid reaches each of the districts of the capital city of Madrid, as well as the peripheral towns and villages. We have 75% of the people that live in Madrid have a metro stop in less than 600 meters from their home. And then we have the roadways and the roadway network, and I'm very happy to see Perre Navarro here. We have thousands of kilometers of roads that require maintenance, but are also, of course, always being expanded. And the third pillar of our activities has to do with the urban public bus system that cover the entire region of Madrid, 179 different towns and villages, up to the mountainous regions to the north, to the plains on the south, and the metropolitan area near Madrid. I was the mayor of Alcorcón, which is a town just outside Madrid, and these are actually cities in and of themselves. They're large cities. I had the honor of being mayor of Alcorcón, and we have bus systems that link up these neighboring towns and villages and cities around Madrid, and that is absolutely in need of strategic coordination. And I also want to make reference to one of the lines of action that our government is currently undertaking, and that is the interchange stations, and these are the connecting stations. We have the work's already underway for expanding and enlarging the connecting train stations so that our trains, our commuter trains, and our main train station in Atocha in Madrid is going to receive heavy investments in expansion and in modernization. So at the end of the day, the aspect of mobility is extremely complex and full of nuances, and I think we need to gradually move towards intermodal transport, and it has to be part of our strategy planning for infrastructure as well. So we have to provide the infrastructure and the legislation that is necessary for that to be approved and financed. For example, we have the new Mobility Act on the table. We have another act on the table as well in terms of car sharing and taxi services. So we are going to have a wealth of regulatory measures as well as acts and policies and measures that is going to allow us to grow into the future, taking into account all these different kinds of mobility, all of these different modes of transport. And of course, these have to be committed to decarbonization, rely upon innovation, as well as, very importantly for us, have to be financed. And this is my way of conclusion, that the role that transport plays, the function of transport, is so important that we mustn't underestimate the need to make sure that these technologies are put in place so that we allow people to move about freely, that they can use the services, they can have that regional cohesion to move from one region to the next in the Spanish geography. So I think it's important to say that over 45% of the investors that come to Madrid do so because of the transport infrastructure we have to offer. And so I think we need to remind ourselves again and again of how important mobility and transport infrastructure really is. At the end of the day, crises come and go, and affecting your. And although we don't like to talk about crises, the fact is that we are living a moment of extreme difficulties, and in times such as these, transport are an element of economic stability, of safety, of robustness. Because if those infrastructures are there and they work, that gives citizens a sense of assurance. That their mobility can continue, they can continue with their daily lives. And again, we want to look at the negative side of things, and that is the polarization of society, something we want to do away with, the elimination of inequalities, so that mobility can be sort of a leveling agent. People can rely upon mobility whether they have a private vehicle or not. That should not be a limiting factor. And so all kinds of mobility should be made available to citizens, so that whether they have a private car or not, public transport has to be there to cover all of our citizens' needs. And it's true that we cannot deny that cars are the predominant means of transport. And what we need to do is to continue working along the lines of making cars less and less pollutant, and they can be used as efficiently and as sustainably as possible. But I don't want to wipe automobiles off the map by any means. Mobility in private vehicles is going to continue to be an important share of the mobility pool, and we're going to have to ensure that transport includes all kinds of transport. As long as citizens know that it can be more efficient, it can be more available and safer and sustainable, I think all of the policymakers need to realize that through our efforts, by coordinating our efforts and placing our wager on the best modes of transport that offer more safety, more quality, more accessibility, and more respect for the environment. That's the way we see it in Madrid, and we think that that's probably the way you see it in your regions as well. I think these are common objectives we share, and we'll continue to work together to make those objectives a reality. So thank you once again for inviting me to the forum. I wish you the best of success, and I'm sure it will be an extremely interesting day ahead, and a lot of best practices will come to light, and we'll be able to see what's being done in other European countries and some of the decisions that are being made in other countries. We're interested to hear all of those. And again, thank you very much on behalf of the region of Madrid, and my best wishes to all. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, consejero.
Thank you, Regional Minister of Transports and Infrastructures from the region of Madrid. We are truly grateful for the effort you made to be with us today. As an introduction to this panel, he has given us a very good and general overview of everything we're going to be talking about in this panel, and how we can work together to attain decarbonization objectives, and how we can accomplish what we have set out to reach, but of course in an orderly and organizational manner, making sure that citizens are in the focal point, all types of vehicles are taken into account. And it also sheds light on something which I feel is extremely interesting, and which we can talk about in just a few moments, and that is sometimes we have the impression, maybe erroneously, but we have a lot of uncertainty of how things are going to work out, how things are going to advance, and of course that can affect decision making, and it can affect the way citizens feel about mobility. So I think there's a very clear concession here, and that is that we need to collaborate. All levels of government need to work together in order to walk this path together. So we're going to go from Madrid to Brussels, and then we'll go back to Madrid, and then we'll end up in Malaga. So that's the geographical setup of today's panel discussion. So we're now going to hear from a legislator at European level, and then we're going to hear from a national policymaker, and then we'll go down to the regional level, hearing from the Director General for Mobility of Malaga's City Council. So Pablo Arias is next. I would also like to thank him for the effort he has made to be here from all the way from Brussels. He is Member of Parliament at the Commission, at the Committee for Transport and Tourism. He has a MBA and is also a long-standing member of the European Parliament from 2009 to the present, and has always been a very close collaborator, and so that we always have the best information from Brussels here in Andalusia. And I want to take the opportunity to thank him for all of the assistance he has provided us over the years. I would like to say it publicly that you have been a great ally for us in Andalusia by all of the assistance you've provided from the European Parliament to us at the regional level. So I would like to give Pablo the floor so that you could tell us a little bit about what is being done in the European setting, either from where you're sitting or from the podium, whichever you prefer. I'm very comfortable here. Thank you very much, and thank you for your kind introduction. I would also like to thank the organizers for the invitation, and the city councils of Seville, Malaga, the Royal Automobile Club of Spain, and all of the institutional bodies that have contributed to making this forum a success. So I am already convinced that this is an important forum to hold, and from my standpoint, the opportunity to participate in this first forum is truly an honor and a pleasure. And I'm happy to tell you what is happening in Brussels, in the European Parliament. And of course, we are the ugly duckling of the policy-making debates, because yesterday you were talking with Formula E, FIA, and motorsports, and we are perhaps the more boring section of the debate, European policy-making and legislation. So what is actually going on in Europe? We have a legislation that is underpinned by two basic pillars. One is the digital, and the other is the environmental pillar. And thirdly, one that is less talked about, is the European way of life. And a lot of people associate that with immigration or migration, but it also has to do with everything we do in Europe, because we are now talking about environmental measures that affect every member state in the European Union. It was also a committee for transport, and now we have something that is overshadowing transport, which is environmental issues. Of course, anything that is decided upon in transport has its environmental impact. And then, of course, if we want to be competitive in Europe, we have to be digital. And so we have the digital pillar, so nothing that is done in terms of legislating in Europe can be or can leave out the question of digital competencies. And then the European way of life is the way and form in which we have a European lifestyle. We want to have a legislation that is clearly European in nature. It's based on the values and principles that Europeans have, and we don't want anyone imposing anything on us from outside of Europe. So why is mobility so important in these three pillars? Because if I talked about these three pillars, we have connected vehicles, that's digital, that's technology. We want to decarbonize. With the Fit for 55 measures are a great example of how we can pass the measures for decarbonizing our economy for 2055, which is one of the major challenges that we are facing, and it is on the table. It's already been passed, and it's in the process of being implemented. But from my own personal standpoint, I think what we need to do more of is listening to you, to the automobile industry, to the automotive industry, the sector, because of our three pillars, we have one, I talked about environment, digital, and way of life. We have, of course, something that we all acknowledge, which is the right to mobility. Mobility is a right, and so anything we do has to take into account this basic and fundamental right. We have to implement digital competencies. We have to do capacity building in the digital sector. And in environmental issues, we have to take into account mobility. And the way of life in Europe, of course, includes mobility. So we have those three pillars that are permeated continuously by the topic of mobility. So we have to listen to you, because legislators often think that their objectives are more important than anything else, than anything that is happening in any one or given industry, and that is not the case. So it could be that we're not listening enough to the automobile industry, to the mobility sector. So I think we need to work harder at that, and we need to go a little bit closer to what is being done in the private sector, and we need to look at the very specific actions that are being taken. And this is a forum in which we can talk about our ideas and formulas and solutions and how we can approach the challenges we face ahead. And we have the prohibition of fuel engine vehicles for 2035. So we have that. That's an imposition. And I don't think that's the right path. I think we're going down the wrong path if we are going to do away with fuel propelled in motor engine vehicles for 2023, because that is a revolution that is not accompanying a European way of life. We have been working on this subject for many years now, but I think we have a welfare state that has been built in Europe, and it's very difficult to sustain that state of well-being, that welfare state. We have those ingredients that are part of our welfare state, but we have this other fourth area, which is the European way. We have things that have interrupted that, which are things such as the pandemic, a war that was unforeseen and unwanted, and no one thought that well into the 21st century we would be facing a war of these characteristics. But we still have those objectives set, and that is the Green Deal. And the Green Deal is there. And I don't think anyone debates the fact that the Green Deal is part of the way, the best way we can fight against climate change. And I fully agree that we have to take action. But what we cannot do is legislate by imposing measures that are going to take our competitiveness away from us, because 20 years ago was 23% of the GDP, world GDP, and 20 years later we are only 17% of the world's GDP. So we've fallen back, we have lost momentum in terms of the world presence of the European Union on the scale, on the economic scale of the world's economy. So if we're going to continue on this path of losing ground, we're going to be doing something very unfortunate. We're going to be doing a bad thing for Europe. And so I think we need to talk about this openly. We need to discuss which are the best ways we can find solutions for the industry without imposing laws such as the prohibition of motor engines, fuel-propelled motor engine vehicles for the year 2035. We need to look at the population, the citizens, the industry. We have to look at all of the different stakeholders and how we can do this in the most intelligent way possible. And there are really two ideas I wanted to share with you today with regards to this issue. At yesterday's dinner, we had presentations given by startups, 5 different startups, which I think is an extremely positive thing. Young people, the younger generation. And when I'm talking about European projects, I think they have an expiration date if we don't have young people on board. People who speak languages, they speak the language of the environment and of the digital era. So we need young people that are able to not only fight against climate change, but speak the language of the environment and of the digital era. They are fluent in those languages, so to speak. And so, of course, this is a simile, but what I mean is that they are prepared in the very best way possible to bring new ideas to the table, and of course, help us in the best way to accomplish our goals for the future. And so we are delighted to see that those startups are there, and we need to see what we've done up to now, if they can help us to continue to be competitive, if we can have young people on board with us on our projects in Europe. That is absolutely vital, I think, for the survival of Europe. So we need to bring in new talent, and the young people are the ones who have the best and most intelligent ideas for the disruptive moment we're living in. And just as Enrique said, we're always open to the ideas that you have, and we are more than happy to work with you as we have in the past and continue to do so in the future. So I'm going to leave it here, and if you like, when we have the Q&A session, I'll jump into the discussion once again. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Pablo.
Thank you very much, Pablo. I think we've discovered today a new quality of this member of the parliament, the chef Arias, today, that being a chef and the new kitchen is so good. He's speaking about recipes and cooking a dish of fundamental basic ingredients. He's always helped us understand the complexity, and you see, it's a luxury to have the representatives of the different administrations that are engaged in the launching and managing of all these aspects of mobility. And it is clear that I knew we were going to talk about the Green Deal, a basic pillar for this Green Deal, which is the European Parliament, and all the ideas that orient the European programs, the European way. But I think that this forum is going to give to bring about very good ideas that are somehow new and that will continue feeding this ongoing discussion. The legislator must listen. When a legislator says that, he becomes full of credibility. So one has to listen to the reality. The decisions must be made with the base of the evidence. This is something that is so obvious, but sometimes it's not taken into account. And another thing, imposition does not help transition. That's another one of those ideas. And the revolution is different from transition. So we have to guarantee the sustainability of the welfare state, and we have to work along that line. And also the citizens must be able to be active actors of this, and the industry must also be part of the recipe. And finally, the need to have the youth on board, because I always like to say that the youth is not the future, is the present, and they are already building the future, and our mission is to help them and not to stop them from doing what they have to do. And thank you very much, Pablo. We may go into more details later. And now we're going to talk with somebody who has a lot of power. I know that legislation is very serious, and unless we talk with these somehow easy terms, when we're talking about the regulatory framework and mobility, intelligent, smart mobility and smart regulation, somebody who knows a lot about this in Spain and all. But those of you who do not have a car, maybe some people here do not have a car, but I'm sure that there are very few. But those of you who have a car that had never ever had a fine, no one raise your hand, because we are not always the best drivers. Someone has to be taking care of our safety. And safetiness has to do with mobility, digitalization, citizenship, transport. And there we have somebody amongst us that I cannot, Pera, I need to tell a personal story that I had with you, because it's been such a such a wonderful thing to me that Pera and I have met 32 years ago. We met in the north of the Catalonian region, near the border with France, in a time in which we were young. I was the provincial delegate of employment, and he was there before me. But when I got there, he was the most important authority of that province. But he was the most important public authority, and he was very, very young. And then life got us separated, and he was managing at the level of the City Council of Barcelona. Then he was Director General for Traffic in the government of Spain. When he was in the Barcelona City Council, I was the representative of the government of Spain in Catalonia. And when I quit that position, he came back to the Direction General of Traffic, General Directorate of Traffic, and today we are together on this panel in Sevilla talking about something that is so important for all of us. I feel so happy to be with him here, even though we belong to different political orientations, different political parties. We still keep a very good friendship. I admire him greatly, and even though we belong to different political parties, confronted political parties, I really think he has a lot to say. So let us hear now Pedro Navarro, the Director General of Traffic in Spain. Good morning. I am here because it is 9:30 in the morning, and I say either you change a little bit the whole show and wake people up. It is difficult. We are in Sevilla, and people tend to make it difficult to wake up. First of all, I thank you for your kind invitation to be part of this mobility forum. I want to congratulate the organizers, the Royal Automobile Club of Spain, the Junta de Andalucía, regional government, and the city councils of Malaga and Sevilla, with a particular special mention to Enrique Millo and Suari, who are the ones who've really put all the necessary energy into this project. From the General Directorate for Traffic, we were there on this project from the very beginning. These initial dates were May the 26th and 27th, and then there was a call for elections in Andalucía 6 months ago, and now the project, so we couldn't hold the forum then, and the project comes back, and we finally are here, and it is extremely good to link automotive an automobile with mobility. I think it is very timely because of this, the moment in which we live in a time of change and evolution, transition. It is a good time when we really need to identify the solid guidelines that will guide us through to the future. We are in a model changing period, in a speed transition, and many think that one of the things that we need is cooperation and coordination between administrations, cooperation, public-private partnerships, because if everyone is working without looking at the neighbor, we will never, ever achieve our objectives. So if we're able to ensure this cooperation, as regards mobility, I don't want to refer to the European level, but at national level, I wanted to say something. This is the Ministry of Mobility. Many years ago, we were asking to have a Ministry for Mobility because we had a myriad of institutions, the Environmental Ministry, the Directorate General for Traffic, but not the Ministry of Transport. And the Ministry of Transport was the authority that took care of mobility all over Europe. So we needed to do that in Spain as well, so that we needed to have mobility as one of the competencies of the Ministry of Transport. When we have an important public policy, the first thing we have to do is to look at the institutional organization. The World Bank did that. So first of all, set have a real, true, good organization, have a good ministry, the Ministry for Mobility, and then you can start defining the mobility strategy. Now we're having this Mobility Act. France has already passed 2 Mobility Acts, and we are in the process to pass the first one ever in our history. So we are somehow lagging behind regarding Europe in these topics of mobility. I remember when we started drafting the traffic mobility strategy, we thought that we needed to align that strategy with some strategy that the government had in place. But I think that I found 15 or 20 different strategies that had to do with the mobility. So that makes this forum ever so important, because we need to really be able to bring about the key messages out of all this myriad of strategies in order to get the very concrete ideas that will help us be successful. And mobility in general, it is true that when we talk about mobility, people think that we're talking about Madrid or Barcelona, the big cities. Thanks God, Spain is not Madrid and Barcelona. It's much more than that, with a greater diversity and particularly different modes of transport, different ways of mobility. And in the big cities, the General Directorate for Traffic will have the feeling that in Europe, the time of the big cities is not the same. Thanks to the train and thanks to internet, the middle-sized cities are here to stay, because the quality of life in a middle-sized city is much higher than the quality of life in big cities. And very often the cities like Sevilla or Malaga, you are perfectly located in your geography area to become really the type of place people want to live in the near future. Roads, train, and cars, the citizen will have to decide, depending on his or her particular circumstances and the offer that he or she has, what is his or her favorite mode of transport. And in the city, the scooter, the bicycle, no. The challenges for mobility in the big city are the urban distribution of goods. that economic activity, that's an employment, and this is growing and growing. That's a big challenge that cities have, and also the motorcycle. Every year we have more and more registered motorcycles in our fleet in Spain. Green and digital mobility. We all agree in the fact that the definition has to be safe, sustainable, healthy, universal, efficient, digital, all those adjectives. Green and digital. And let me just refer briefly to the green aspects of the mobility. We are all aligned in the fight against climate change, all of us. There may be somebody who still refuses the existence of the climate change, but we are all in line with that. Industry, citizens, civil society, administration, government, we are all aligned behind this objective to fight against the climate change. The objective is decarbonization, and let us not be wrong. Electrification of mobility is a very important element in this process of decarbonization, but it is not the only one. So the General Directorate for Traffic objective, decarbonization, yes, but technology neutrality. We can have different technologies. We are for the most efficient technology, and this is what we are after. And another idea that we consider is very clear, which is the citizen's freedom to decide on his or her favorite mode of transportation, because this stimulates market competitiveness and will make us more efficient. But we need to respect the citizen's freedom to decide how he or she wants to transport him or herself, depending, of course, on the offer, existing offer. And we see that the passenger vehicles in the Directorate General for Traffic, with the new technologies for different types of the really new thing here is the renting cars, business cars, and public administration's cars. In renting, we have 220,000 vehicles per year registered as renting vehicles. These are new cars that, and this is the best way to introduce any new technology or any new safety system in automobile. The rental car, we are 800,000 vehicles for rent in the country, and we register 220,000 for rent every year. So these are the big doors, and on top of that, the business cars and the administration cars. And this is a personal reflection I wanted to share with you. I remember when we all wanted to promote the use of a bicycle, and we started to implement bike lanes, and everybody said, but what are you doing? People are not riding bikes in the city. So why are you building the bike lanes? And then we said that the first thing we had to do was building the bike lanes so people feel safe, and then the people will use bicycles. And this is what's going on. And I believe that with the electric vehicle will be something like that. First of all, we solve the problem of this charging stations so that the citizen is confident that he will always have a place to charge their electric car, and then they will buy the electric car, but they need to be safe and to be convinced that there won't be a problem. But I think we have not followed the right pace that in order to really give these purchasing of electric vehicles that momentum that it needs. And we're talking about employment, economy, 10% of the GDP exports. So it is very clear this is an industry that is very much needed for the country. And what about digitalization? What are we doing at the General Directorate for Traffic? We are digitalizing the recording of the vehicles. In the big data era, we need to have a great deal of information. we register everything about the vehicle, and then we reinforce every possibility to connect the data, because all the mayors and the city councils will be able to control where the cars are. In the big data times, data is absolutely clear, and this car records as a registration is very important at this moment in time, and we want to have connected vehicles. Regarding road safety, one of the keys for road safety is digitalized vehicles, connected vehicles. And this is the big leap forward, so that the road can speak to the vehicle and the vehicle can speak with other vehicles on the same road. The V16, you remember when we have an accident on the road, you need to use the emergency signals in the highway, and everybody knows that when you stop the car in the middle of a highway to set the alarm sign 60 meters away from the car, and that implies a danger. In Luxembourg, they thought that it was more dangerous to get off the car and place the alarm sign, the triangle, but now we have something that you put on top of your roof, of your car roof, and there is a signal there that will go to the cloud, and that signal will go to TomTom, Google Cloud, and all the vehicles that are connected. And before any car on the same road sees actually the car that is broken down on the margin on the side of the highway, the car will get the information that in 2 kilometers there is something and that you need to reduce your speed. So it is not just a flashing light on the roof of your car, but also a signal that goes to the cloud, and from there it gets distributed to every car and or workers in the highways, all special transports, geolocalization, and tests, everything will be really geolocalized. And this is the big leap ahead, together with the different technologies to help the drivers drive. And I want to really acknowledge the automotive industry, automobile industry, the huge effort they've done in order to incorporate safety features to all vehicles, whatever the range of the vehicle. So if we have connected cars and we have all these safety features embedded in the cars, in the manufacturing of the cars, will enable us to tell the European Union that by 2050 there should not be any more traffic victims, because the whole way of driving will change, and the new generation will not understand how we could live with such a high number of victims and such a high level of suffering because of the bad way we drove. Thank you very much.
Bueno, creo realmente que
I think that Pera's intervention, as we would have known, was very good. It was very interesting. You give us ideas for the headlines. Carmelo, this is great. When you have to draft the conclusion, you already have everything written down here. I wanted to highlight what Pera said, and that because it is right to highlight that from the very beginning of the idea of having the MOU Forum in Andalusia, the first support we got from the central administration was the support from the Director General of Traffic, Pera, because he loves this area. It's part of his life, and he understands the challenges. And from the very onset, we had his support and of his General Directorate, and we know that you will be there for us in the future. When the minister was here, I reminded her that the next edition we will have to require some more implication from the government of Spain, and I'm sure we can count on you, Pera, to help convince the government of the importance of this forum. And Pera referred to what he knows better than anybody, and he shared some ideas that are very good if we want to feed into the discussion of course, a very good speech and how the different administrations are organized and connected, and this is a very good idea. I am an economist specialized in organization issues. If you want to know what is the strategy of an organization, go to the structure of its governance structure. A bad governance structure in an institution will not contribute to implement a very good strategy. So if we have a Ministry for Mobility that can develop a strategy, a new bill, a new act, is a key element for this green and digital economy that he was referring to. Yesterday, you were here also, Pera. There were very good initiatives, 5 startups that we got to know last night, and one of them referred to the importance of having that function of distribution within the cities, the different elements for distribution of many things, food, everything citizens need. More and more people do their purchasing via internet, and hence the distribution of all these goods and products via internet is very important, and the delivery of these goods becomes a service that is will be more and more important. And in the objective of fighting against climate change, the true objective is decarbonization, as Pera has rightly pointed out. And decarbonization is one of the objectives. But now, remember what Pera said. Technology neutrality. This can be done in many, many ways. Electricity is very important, but it's not the only technology to fight against climate change. And something which is obvious and is the citizen's freedom to decide the way he or she wants to move around. Of course, this is we need to keep this principle. Is it the right of the citizen? And he gave us very good figures on renting and rental cars. I think we are registering 400,000 cars between renting and rental cars. That's a future, because one thing is what we have in the old fleet, and we see how we renovate the old fleet, but then all these new cars are going mostly to these sectors also, the automobile and automotive industry. In future forum, we will also have other industries too, but this forum this year is focused on the automobile and automotive sector. And Pera has also referred to employment, because neither the fight against climate change or decarbonization should be against the public active employment policies, because otherwise we will be just fighting against ourselves. And it is important to take this into account. Thank you very much for explaining us the objectives and the challenges, the connected vehicle, and the importance of vehicle registration data, because this is key in everything we're dealing with here. Thank you very much, Pera, and we will continue with the final intervention in this trip that we're doing through the different levels of the administration. We started with the regional government of Madrid, and then we went to Brussels, then central government in Madrid, and now we're going to the first local. And I'm going, when I say going down, it is not the lowest, because it is the most important level, because it is the first contact of the citizen with the administration. When you are in the streets, people in your city know you. Pablo is more difficult. It's in the Olympus mountain in Brussels. But the first level of contact with the citizens is the city council, and the citizen may stop you in the streets because they know you, why you did that, why have you designed this low emissions area, now I cannot go into that area with my car and all that. And this is something that people tell you directly. So Trinidad Hernandez, Director General for Mobility of Malaga City Council, is also witness to something that Pera was referring to. When we talk about mobility, not everything is Madrid and Barcelona. There could be a representative from the Madrid or Barcelona City Council, but what we have is talking to city councils that and see what they are doing in these middle-sized cities and how everything they do is compatible with what we are talking here. In the past, she was the responsible for the traffic in the province of Malaga. So you worked with PERA. You were working in the PERA organizational structure. He was my boss, says Trinidad. She's got a degree in law and a master's degree in development and mobility, and also specialized in good transports, road good transport. So Trinidad, you have the floor.
Bueno, buenos días a todos. Estoy un
Good morning, and my apologies because I'm a bit hoarse. I have a cold, but I hope to be able to finish my presentation. Also, my apologies for the absence of our mayor. The mayor of Malaga was initially going to be here. Francisco de la Torre had a conflict in his agenda and has given me, therefore, the privilege of addressing you this morning together with the other distinguished guest speakers on this panel. The city of Malaga has been in the process of overhauling its mobility scheme for the last 20 years. We are in the process of a new mobility scheme. So our mobility plan is by default connected, sustainable, and safe one. So in the process, over the course of these last 20 years, Malaga has been working on this new mobility plan, and we've had the very good fortune of having resources in the amount of over 200 million euros that have been put at the disposal of this plan and has been made available at the end of the day to our taxpayers and citizens. And I'd like to focus on two of these. One is the Send-to-Haul plan, which together with Japan helped us come up with a new mobility plan. We had the Mitsubishi brand supporting us in that, and we got 65 electric vehicles. And this was just the seed that was planted in Europe as well as in other continents for the project of this type. And then Certemos is another project that we have just finished. The first phase of it was finished in 2021, and this is the first public bus vehicle which is fully connected and electric. The acceptance has been such that we are already in a position to announce that in the coming months we're going to announce the second phase of this project, and we are going to see how the traffic lanes are going to be used by these buses. We're going to have special bus lanes in Malaga for this. And you might wonder, how was Malaga capable of achieving these goals? I think it's because in terms of electric mobility, we've always been pioneers. We've had a level of governance based on the collaboration with universities, civil society, the private sector, and all of the different stakeholders based upon three concepts. Number one, talent. Number two, effort. And thirdly, teamwork. And I think those are the three key factors that have led to our success. And I think in any region, those same three key factors would be the same ones. The only thing that makes us different is that we've adapted those regulations that have been passed in Europe, and we have transposed it to our local policies. And our citizens are there at the forefront. They are the ones who can come up to the regional ministry knock on our door and ask us why we've changed this or that, why we have a bus lane, why we have an electric vehicle parking lot. The reality of Malaga is the citizens feel like they have an open door, a chance to talk directly to the policymakers, to the decision makers. And this mobility plan that is underway is based on regulations, technology, and infrastructure. So all three of those, again, are three key elements so that regulations that are passed at the European or national level or even at the regional level can be put in place at the local level. In our City Council of Malaga, we have seen how this can be done either faster or slower. We try to do it as fast as possible, as expediently as possible, so that the measures we have in place in Malaga today were put in place in January 2021, just a short time after the new Mobility Act was passed. And so electric vehicles are have been around, are being accommodated, and are being incentivized by the City Council of Malaga. And we think that the experts are the ones that can help us in the area of technology, because we think that without technology, all of our efforts are in vain. Mobility relies upon technology, especially when you're talking about autonomous driving, and it is going to become a reality in the very, very near future. So buses, that is driverless buses, these driverless buses don't not only have a very safe system in order to avoid any type of incident or accident, have the traffic light signals also regulated that are sending the signals to the bus so that they can stop or go. This is linked up to another project that we have underway, which is incentivizing the use of other modes of transport. But these driverless buses, these autonomous buses, are digitized. They have the latest technology embedded in them. And technology innovation is coming up with all kinds of software and apps, and that is all at our disposal for testing. And perhaps the most controversial part of the whole scheme is the infrastructure, because it seems that building infrastructure seems to be looked down upon, or it seems to be criticized. Spending money on infrastructure is oftentimes cut out of the picture, and I think that's entirely wrong. I think we need to build new infrastructure. I think we sometimes underestimate the fact that citizens need separated bike lanes. We don't have a lot of separated bike lanes, but if we had the mayor here today, he could explain that much better than I can. But we also need a lot of the traffic to be deviated to underground passageways, or we need to detour traffic and allow space for public transportation so the citizens can decide if they want to go in their car, if they want to use public transport, whether it be the bus, the metro, or a taxi. But we need the infrastructure to allow them to make those decisions on their own, so that we have the Malaga Litoral, which means coastline, and so we want all of the traffic on the coastline to be placed in underground passageways and leave intermodal exchange or connecting stations for public transportation to take up that space. And so that, we feel, is the solution. And those are you can see here on the screen the pyramid that I'm referring to, and the scheme that we have designed has to do with these three levels. At the top of the pyramid, you have active mobility, but it's also the smallest part. We talk a lot active mobility, which is walking or cycling, but I must admit that we need the infrastructure there for that. But the fact is that in Malaga, this kind of mobility is perceived more as leisure or sport, not as getting to work or getting to an appointment. Then we have public transportation. We have a very good public transportation system, one of the best in Spain, I would say. It's 100% under the management of the city council, and so it's very easy for us to have an open dialogue and communication with public transportation authorities. And then we also have high quality public transportation. And we need to see what other kinds of public transportation is available in terms of car sharing and taxis. But we also have to have the variety of options available to citizens so that they can make informed decisions. And then at the bottom, the base of the pyramid, we have the priority given to zero emissions vehicles. That is clean fuel or electric vehicles. And I don't think we're fully prepared for this. We have been a benchmark for the number of charging stations in Malaga. We have 74 fast charging stations, 9 buildings that have parking spaces available for using charging stations in the parking lots. And we have been working with different brands of automobiles, and they are also providing charging points for their clients and owners of their brand. And we are still a long way from covering the demand for charging stations. And another thing I want to mention is a project that we have underway, and I think it's better to leave that for the last part of my presentation. But what I want to say now is that just a snapshot of what we're doing here by means of pictures. As you can see, Malaga has undergone enormous changes over the course of history, from very few vehicles on the main street of Malaga. It's called Larios. Larios Street was one of the main thoroughfares of the city, and it's a very wide thoroughfare. And with the consensuated agreement of the citizens and the city government, we have decided to respond to the needs of pedestrians in the city center, and now Lario Street is a fully pedestrianized street, and we have improved the accessibility and better mobility for pedestrians in the town center. What other things have we done? Well, you can see here that you have to make a way for vehicle transport. You have to provide accessibility to those people that live in the downtown area of Malaga. And so in the neighborhoods, we have very, very low speed limits, as low as 20 kilometers per hour, so that we can ensure safety as well as accessibility. And we also have beacons that digitize the traffic control, the speed control system. And we always have unforeseen situations, for example, the access of safety vehicles or things of this sort, ambulances, things of this sort. And then the bike lines, you can see we have hundreds of kilometers of bike lanes in Malaga, and you can see the foreseeable future and how we plan to expand the bike lanes for 2027. So I'm very happy to say that this is one of the topics that the City Council wanted to do more gradually, but I think we need to hit the accelerator in that respect, because we want to meet our goals for 2027. Then we have public rental of mopeds, scooters, and electric bicycles. And we have 5 different companies that have been awarded the contracts for these. Not bad at all. We've had some disorderly use of these vehicles, people leaving them on the pavement and not respecting some of the city ordinance for the use of these types of vehicles, because usually these are people who do not live in the city or do not work in the city. They're used by tourists, and they don't always leave them in the best of conditions, and we've had some conflict in that regard. Now, lowering our speed limits, not only making our city more sustainable, but also making them safer. And so that's why we've lowered the speed limit to 30 kilometers per hour. And obviously, we don't want to make this a sanctioning measure. That is a measure that is only focused on placing fines on drivers when they go over the speed limit. What we've done is we've had different pedestrian crossings, painting signs on the roads to remind drivers of the speed limit. We've had very few accidents in Malaga, and we've brought down the fatality rate because of this. And we also see that public transportation is slowly but surely gaining momentum. And I'm running out of time, so I'm just checking my clock here. We are going to not only expand our bike lane network, but we're also going to expand the bus lane network. And within our low emissions or net zero emissions program, we're also replacing the older vehicles with new clean vehicles. We're going have Euro 4 and 5, and for 2030 we want them to be all plug-in hybrid or electric. And so today I wanted just to mention that the overhauling of the vehicle fleet of our public transportation system is probably where we're going to spend the most money, because again, we want to ensure that it's high quality public transportation whilst also being sustainable and be attractive to users. We're also building a new parking lot, a huge parking lot, where we're going to use PV solar panels on the roofing of it, and it's going to have 100 points of charging stations, so that way we can recharge our public buses, and we can ensure that these facilities ensure that we're going to have the electric buses fully charged and available for providing services to our citizens. Again, our citizens live in a city that's not as large as Madrid or Barcelona, but we want to ensure that they can rely upon sustainable, safe, reliable public transportation service. And by using these electric vehicles, we need this infrastructure. We need a system by which these charging points, these charging stations can be at the service of our public transportation system. And the Malaga H2 City project is another hydro generation project. This is a pioneering project, and I really think that the future of transport is not 100% electric. We have to explore other pathways, other alternatives of fuels, and green hydrogen is one of those alternatives. I think it's a magnificent option for sustainable mobility, and I think it's proving to be so. We also have these connected autonomous or driverless vehicles, and how we are providing charging stations to users. Here you can see that we are not at the capacity we'd like to be. We're only at about 10% of the capacity, so if you drive an electric vehicle into Malaga, you can go into an app, you can access an app and see where the charging stations actually are. And again, delivery systems is something that Pere talked about, and I think our moderator also mentioned the importance of allowing spaces for delivery services to be done, and we need to be up to the task, because we know that people are buying increasingly online, and their purchases have to be delivered to them. Package courier services, for example, restaurants and bars have to have their beverages delivered to them. So beer brands, soft drink brands, all of these need to deliver their goods to establishments. And so we're now in the process of overhauling the delivery system plan, and we're digitizing it, and so that we can read the license plates of these delivery vehicles, so we know how long they stay in a given area, when they come in, when they leave, and it's free of charge. It's not subject to a fee. But if you overstay the allocated time period, you are going to have to pay a charge. For example, if you're going to be unloading beer and you're there for 6 hours because you only have one person unloading the beer bottles because they only have one trolley to carry the beer into the restaurant, well, then you're going to have to look at your logistics systems, because we can't allow one delivery truck to be there for 6 hours. You get my point. So again, this is an example of some of the logistics that are needed for this. We have a logistics center. The traffic control center is not something that is unique to Malaga. Other towns and cities and capital cities have control centers like this, so we call it the CAPS Center. And I'm very happy with it, because all of the challenges that or the incidents that happen in the city can be easily dealt with through our control center logistics managers. And what we want is a dynamic flow of distribution, of mobility, and we have innovative projects underway so that Ecotraffics, which is an arterials optimizer, can help us decipher the best way to manage traffic when incidents do happen, how we can dynamize the flow of traffic so that traffic signals can be synchronized, and then we can allow for these autonomous or driverless buses to continue their routes. And I'll leave it here, and I would like to thank you for your kind attention.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Many thanks for that presentation. We have given you a wealth of information throughout the panel session, and Malaga has been no exception. I think you've explained extremely well the many things that you're doing in Malaga to make Malaga a leading city in terms of innovative solutions to mobility, and how you are doing a lot of things to make Malaga really a reference in terms of smart mobility and allowing citizens to have a wide array of options to choose from. So you've also left us with a number of headlines or key messages that we can use in our statement at the end of the day. Our final statement is going to take up many of these ideas, and I think they're going to be very well received when we draft the statement, the final statement for this forum. Many of these were brought up yesterday, for example. Sometimes we wonder, are we ready for this? We look at Norway, where 95% of the vehicles that they sell are electric vehicles, and they've had to put the brakes on in the sense that they don't have the infrastructure in place to accommodate so many electric vehicles. But that'll have to be the subject of a debate for another day, because we have overrun the time we had allocated for this panel. So I'm unfortunately not going to be able to open the floor for questions and answers or for discussion. I hope to have an opportunity, perhaps during the coffee break or other times during the day. We're going to be able to continue our discussions. If anyone here on the panel just wants to give a two-sentence conclusion to the panel, I'm not going to ask you any questions. We've absolutely run out of time, but if you want to say one last word before we close the session, feel free to do so. 30 seconds, max. Well, competitiveness is probably a key word here. We're with the green technologies that are not fully developed, that are still some ways away, and we need to be very cautious, and we need to go forward very with caution. That is, we need to test drive them. We need to use that sandbox, that sandbox concept of before we put anything in full deployment, we need to test them. And then we've talked about cities. Obviously, Seville and Malaga are large cities, but we also need to take into account mid-sized cities and even towns or villages or rural areas that are also in need of mobility. And we need to take those places into account, not only the large cities, but also the small or mid-sized cities. Pere, any last words? Don't worry, but those charging stations, you said you're well below the capacity. Well, the same thing goes for the bike lanes. We caught up in the end, and the charging stations, the exact same thing will happen. We'll catch up. And I also think it's important to stress that the delivery systems, today's Black Friday, don't forget it. So delivery is going to be a big thing today. And you know, there are a lot of deliveries that aren't actually made. That is, the delivery truck arrives and then the person isn't at home and cannot accept the delivery. And now we're going to have a digitized system in place. And so before even going into the area, there has to be an acceptance of the delivery. There has to be a connection between the deliverer and the deliveree, so that we can ensure that that is not a failed delivery. And then we also have to look at how well we can organize public transportation, public bus stations, municipal buses. I'm talking about urban transport, buses in the urban setting. We need to make sure that we have bus stations that are in a condition that is comparable to the national bus system, bus stops and bus stations. And so we have a splendid national bus system and bus stations, but we need to upgrade our urban bus stations. I'll leave you with, well, one last word. The bus station in Malaga is, as you say, not perhaps the best, but we have a project. Did you see that project that we have in the pipeline? It's absolutely amazing. Yes, the importance of those interconnecting stations is also important. And this is definitely the last word, but I think it's important to say this is the last mile. The use of drones and how we're going to regulate the aerial space over a city, the use of drones. We haven't talked about drones yet, so that's something that we have on the table there. There's a lot left to talk about. Absolutely, drones is one of them. Maritime traffic, railway traffic, and all of course, this is just the first forum, so we'll have time ahead of us to deal with all those topics. Thank you so much for being part of this panel and all of the information you've shared with us. Very important for all of us, and we very much appreciate it. Thank you.